I won't have an area to set up my own sukkah this year, so my questions are, can I fulfill my obligation by having two meals in a public-made sukkah? So, for those who may not know, a sukkah is a reference to the temporary shelter, the temporary hut that Jewish males specifically, are commanded to dwell in for a week, according to God's divine command to the people of Israel. So this is according to God's covenant with the people of Israel, as you can find in the Torah, in the Law of Moses, the first few books of the Bible. Specifically, you can find it mentioned in Leviticus 23 if you're looking for a specific chapter to be introduced to these holidays. So we dwell in these huts for a week in remembrance of wandering in the wilderness under Moses' leadership, and to remember that although we are no longer slaves in Egypt and we're no longer wandering in the wilderness, yet our lives are still temporary in this world, and despite our creature comforts, yet we are still wholly dependent upon God's mercy and should therefore be grateful and recognize God's blessings in our lives. So, can I fulfill my obligation to have two meals in a public-made sukkah? The answer is yes. There's no difference. You can spend the entire pilgrimage festival staying in a friend's sukkah as well. The main thing is that you dwell in a sukkah, a kosher sukkah. Must shaking the lulav and etrog be done in the sukkah, even if it's only a public one? You can fulfill your obligation of taking up the lulav and the etrog. It's not only those, it's also hadasa and arava. So you can fulfill this obligation of worshiping God, taking up these fruit items in or outside of a sukkah. So even if you did not do this miswah inside of the sukkah, you can still fulfill your obligation. Are there different obligations between a public and a private sukkah? No. And my answers to you are with regard to the bare bones halacha. There may be different customs that have developed post-Talmudic era. I'm trying to answer you in the most broad way with regard to how halacha is codified in the Mishneh Torah. What requirements are d'oraitha, meaning obligatory? What requirements are obligatory specifically from the direct command of God in the Torah? And what requirements are derabanan? Which requirements are rabbinic in origin, originating from the great Sanhedrin, which God commanded that we heed. And very often people will use the term derabanan in even a broader sense than that, but I think he's really concerned with the derabanan, the rabbinic requirements that we're obligated by God to heed. So if you would like to know those requirements with confidence, I encourage you to look in Sefer Zamanim, the Book of Times, in the Mishneh Torah. You will find the Rambam's codification of these halachot in Sefer Zamanim, the Book of Times, in the laws regarding Sukkot, which you can find in the subsection of Sefer Zamanim, which is titled the halachot, hilchot, shofar ululav. I will show you real fast where you can find that. But first, let's answer this other question. As a ger, is there any difference in the halacha that would be required of a Jew, but as a ger, an immigrant unto the people of Israel, should not be done? The quick answer to that is, if you're referring to ger in the sense of a ger tzedek, a full convert to the Jewish people, and this is anybody who has taken upon himself the entirety of the covenant of Torah, and he's legally obligated by it because he accepted this covenant and entered into this covenant in the presence of kosher Jewish witnesses, then there's no difference whatsoever. There are no differences. As the verse says in the book of Numbers, chapter 15, that there is one law for the native born and for the immigrant who immigrates unto you. As you are, so is he before the Lord. What are some of the things that might be considered insulting or a Hillul Hashem, a desecration of God's name, to the Jewish people that we should avoid this Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot? I can't list an exhaustive list in a reasonable amount of time because everybody's different and some people have pet peeves. But in a general sense, if anybody who doesn't have a lot of experience among the Jewish people is celebrating any of these holidays among Jewish people for the first time, it doesn't matter whether you have been born Jewish but not experienced in the observance of these holidays, or whether you have recently converted, or whether you are not Jewish and not intending to become Jewish, but you're just there for the experience. In all these cases, you don't need to be feeling like you are walking on eggshells. Even if you make a mistake, it should not be considered the end of the world. Trust me, people who grew up in observant Jewish families make mistakes all the time, and half the time they don't even realize it. But there are certain practices that are not common. I don't want to say here that they are not allowed, because the mere fact that something is not common does not mean it's not allowed. And the mere fact that something is not commonly done does not mean that it shouldn't be done. Some things we are supposed to do that almost no one does. I would say one of the biggest ones is that in the land of Israel, it's pretty unheard of for observant Jewish people to wear tefillin, phylacteries, during the intermediate days of Sukkoth and Pesach. Whereas outside of the land of Israel, it's fairly common to wear tefillin during the intermediate days of Sukkot and Pesach, unless you are talking about Hasidic Jews. And of course, Hasidic Jews, especially in the form of Chabad, have become sort of the dominantly noticed traditional Jewish organization. But you should know that that is specific to these Hasidic groups, that they don't put on tefillin. Historically, the Jewish people wore tefillin during the intermediate days of Sukkot and Pesach. And they still do outside the land of Israel, unless they are Hasidic or other extra Kabbalistically inclined communities. Most traditional Ashkenazim still do put tefillin on during the intermediate days, unless they live in Israel. So if you're in Israel and you don't want to stand out or make a scene, you don't want to put on tefillin in front of observant Jews, and if you're in Israel. For Yom Kippur, of course, you don't want to openly eat food. Let's assume that the person visiting a synagogue on Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, let's assume he's not fasting. You don't want to eat right in front of people. It's just rude. I mean, if you're in a regular public place, sure, but not if you're in the synagogue. Rosh Hashanah, just in general, do whatever you see everybody else doing. And if you're unsure, then ask. If you're in a place where you're really feeling like you're walking on eggshells, I would suggest you find other people to associate with. Life is too short to be around people who are so neurotic and introverted that they cannot tolerate newcomers not doing everything perfectly, while simultaneously being completely oblivious to the fact that they themselves are probably falling short in any number of ways that they're completely unaware of. Alright, well, I hope that helped. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you where you can find more details regarding the halachot, the laws concerning Sukkot, and which are deoraita from the Torah and which are derabbanan from our sages, Hazal Chachamenu Zichronam Livracha. You want to go to the Chabad website, because this is the only place that I know of where you can find the Mishneh Torah translated to English and easily navigable. This is not an endorsement of Chabad, But yeah, they're taking over, y'all. So they do have a very useful website. Again, I'm not endorsing the majority of the articles on their website, but they do have a library of classic Jewish texts on their website. These are texts that are embraced by the entire Jewish world. And by embraced, I don't mean that everybody strictly goes by them, but everybody respects them in the Jewish world. And these, when I say classic texts, I'm talking about Jewish literature that predates the existence of Chabad. Chabad is a Hasidic group, and it has only been around for a few centuries. So go to the search bar, type in Mishneh Torah, click. This is the only complete code of all of the 613 mitzvot and the rabbinic explanations, injunctions regarding those mitzvot that the Rambam compiled and organized in a logical manner from the various ancient rabbinic sources. So we're going down to Sefer Zmanim, the Book of Times. That's where you find the laws for holidays. You click on Shofar, Sukkot, Lulav. Okay, chapter 1, and here you will find all that you need to know. The Rambam, at the beginning of every book of the Mishneh Torah, the first thing he does is lists the Torah obligations, the bare bones Torah obligation regarding the topic of whatever book you're looking at. So I hope that helps. And the remainder of the books will elaborate upon the rabbinic aspects and rabbinic understanding of how to fulfill the Torah obligation. Wish you guys a meaningful rest of your month of Elul. ושתכתבו בספר החיים ובספר הזיכרון. May you be written in the book of life and the book of remembrance. כן יהי רצון.